All right.
Hello, everyone.
We're live. Till death. No, it's not. We said last week that we would have a cool song
Yeah, we forgot.
to start off, but next week,
Forgot.
we promise you guys next week we'll have a really cool song to introduce
Yeah.
this amazing podcast.
Yeah.
So, welcome to those who actually, before I even say welcome, let me give you guys some direction here. Listen, if you believe that this podcast, if you watched the last episode and it actually helped you, and by the time you finish this episode, it's going to help you as well. I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to this channel.
Yes.
It is so important to subscribe because when you subscribe,
Should be here.
I think it's like,
Maybe like here.
back in the days with YouTube, it was like,
I think it's here.
is it like on this side? That side?
Oh no, it's on this side.
That side?
Yeah.
Over here. So back in the days, were you like a YouTube person like 2008 or so?
Not really.
No? Okay.
No.
YouTube was so different before.
Yeah.
But anyways, all that to say is that, guys, make sure you subscribe because when you subscribe, it actually makes a difference and it helps us to reach more people with this channel and this topic. So, without further ado, welcome, guys, to our podcast week number 2.
Yeah.
That's
We're really
exciting.
excited about this week's topic.
It's going to be good.
I think it's going to bless a lot of people. But you guys also need to promise us, not only are you going to subscribe, but you are going to share this video after, like the video. Just make sure you continue to get the word out there so more people can be blessed. And during it, please engage with us. Talk to us.
Yes.
Ask questions. Give us your input. We want you guys to be a part of the conversation.
Okay, let me make sure everybody can hear us. Can everybody hear us very clearly? Because last week, when we started off, a few people could not hear us.
Yes.
There
Give
was
us
an
a
issue
whoop
with
whoop.
Yeah, let us know in the comment section if you can hear us clearly. For those who are watching live, I know if you're watching the replay, this is kind of boring. You're probably like, you want to skip this part, but hey, just bear with us, okay? Because we're doing this live as well, and we want to make sure before we go into this topic that everyone can hear us very clearly. All right, so Tochi said whoop whoop, and Tochi has really good hearing too. So if she says whoop whoop, I think it's working. I think. Okay.
Yeah, we got a few people
All
that say
right,
they can hear
perfect.
us.
And it's clear, it's good. Okay, we're good. All right, so what is today's topic?
Today's topic is building relationship boundaries. So learning how to say no.
Jesus.
Oof. Oh, she
That's
had a
hard.
sound effect there.
Yeah, give me some ideas.
No, please. It's okay.
No. Next week.
Guys, let me just say this. When we talked about starting a podcast, okay, I thought we were going to just set up a phone,
Yes.
keep it basic, simple. I come into Samuel's office. There is 3 cameras right now, 2 mics. There's cords everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
He's controlling some kind of system with his fingers.
Yeah, you gotta
Like,
do
he
well.
can never just keep it simple.
This is quite simple, believe it or
And
not.
apparently this is simple. I got a big stage light,
No, it's not a stage
shining
light,
on
it's a
me.
sound box, but listen. As we continue, because this is a 5-week podcast, okay? Just to make it very clear, we're gonna do this for the next at least 3 weeks now. This is the 2nd week. But I like when things are well done, especially if it's for God. I think it's important for us as Christians to seek excellence.
Yeah.
And this to me is not even excellent. I think this is an okay setup. It's an okay setup.
You're insane.
I'm not. I just appreciate excellence, and I think as believers, that's what we should do. We should appreciate that, excellence represents God.
Okay.
Okay, let's get into the topic. Okay, so we're talking about boundaries.
Someone said only 5 weeks.
Only 5 weeks, yes. That's
Is
the
it only
plan.
5 weeks?
That's the plan. Listen, guys, listen. My wife wants to do something else, and I told her, I'm like, listen, this is.
We'll start here.
Yeah, let's just start with 5 weeks, and then we'll see. But for sure, after 5 weeks, you will not see us continue to do this consistently for a bit. It won't be like a 6 week, 7 week. When they have those revivals
You
and
shouldn't say anything. You should just wait it out.
just let God. Okay, you know what? Sure, but let's get into this topic.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so talk to me about those boundaries.
So wait, actually no. Let's start off with who are we?
You know what?
Who are we?
Great
Who is
point.
the Till Death podcast? Why are we doing this
Yes.
podcast? Because that's important. We're not just here to be here, but there's a reason why we're here. So I'm Latoya. This is my beautiful husband, handsome husband, Samuel. And we have been married now for almost 7 years. We have 2 kids with a baby on the way. And we are absolutely radically passionate about Jesus. We are passionate about building the community.
Yeah.
Just seeing God in the marketplace, seeing God completely infiltrate the earth in every way that we can. And we are creatives. We love to create. We love to communicate and to just be able to connect with people in any way we can.
That was a very good description.
Praise the Lord.
Very well said biography. So that's what we do. And just recently, we released a brand new book.
Yes.
And which
that's why we're here.
I think most people don't understand how big of a deal this is because we've done a lot of stuff by ourselves. Ebooks here and there, but we've never actually done a collaborative book together.
Yeah.
So this is a big deal. And the funny thing about this book, just like with this podcast, we're talking about relationships.
Yes.
The name of the book is called Love and Discernment, and we're going to teach you guys 12 keys to recognizing relationship red flags, which I think everybody needs this very seriously.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a copy, as I mentioned, the pre-orders are out and available, so you can actually grab yourself a copy through the link in our bio.
And the actual books will be out in just a few days.
Yeah.
Is our launch day.
This Friday.
This 10th, Friday. Yeah. So that's exciting. So if you don't have the book, I want you just to do like one of these in the comment section, be ashamed of yourself. And I want to challenge you that after this podcast, go and get yourself a copy. And I want to challenge you to gift somebody else with a copy.
That's a great idea. Bless somebody for Christmas in advance with a copy of this book.
Yeah. Why not?
All right. What are boundaries?
Boundaries. So let's go to www.dictionary.com. Yeah, let's start there.
Let's not overthink it. Let's go to the definition.
So the dictionary says that a boundary is a line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. Personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits.
Okay.
So essentially, boundaries are a barrier that we create around our physical, emotional, mental, which we're going to talk about, being, so that we feel protected, we feel safe, we don't feel like people are violating the things in which we believe, our moral sets, our expectations, our standards.
And the thing with boundaries is it's one of those things that we kind of touched on it last week, but I want to go deeper into it this week. It's one of those things that a lot of people don't put in place because, number one, we don't understand the value of having boundaries.
Yeah.
Number two, nobody taught us what boundaries even are. Number three, I don't think society, if I'm being honest with you, pushes having real boundaries.
Yeah.
I think society has this thing where it pushes boundaries to an extent, but I don't think it pushes it as much as I believe it should.
Yeah.
Right? So one thing we want to know is that when you are, whether you're a human being, you should have boundaries.
Why? Let's talk about why.
So similar to, because I think sometimes we overthink certain terms, right?
Yeah.
And we think that, okay, well, boundaries means this and boundaries means that. My brother Jonathan, he recently had a video about love and he explained it so well. He had different types of love and he just simplified it for people to understand what love is and why, in his words, why we suck at love, which I think is hilarious. So when it comes to boundaries, you don't want to overthink it. The reason why we need boundaries is the same way if you went to a construction site. When you see a set of boundaries in place, is because if you cross that boundary, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
So when it comes to relationships, it's no different. We have boundaries in place because if we cross those boundaries, we are going to get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah. Boundaries are a way to not just protect you, but to protect other people as well. Because sometimes people, well, majority of the times, people's boundaries are different than our own, right? So when we don't let people know what our expectations are, then they're violating us and they don't know. But at least it sets up kind of like a limitation and expectation for those people to live by, so they know how to do relationship with us. A lot of times we're like, well, I want to be a free person, I want to be vulnerable, but having boundaries doesn't mean you're not vulnerable, doesn't mean you're not open, doesn't mean you're not adjustable and you're not adapting. Because the reality about boundaries is, as you get older, as your life changes, as life evolves, your boundaries will change, your moral sets will change, your expectations will change. So it's really important to understand that they're not there to confine you, but they're actually there to protect you.
Yes. And that's the thing, is your perspective of boundaries has to be healthy.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the reasons why a lot of people don't have boundaries in place is our perspective of boundaries means we don't have freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Or it means we're putting a wall in front of us and we're blocking people out, but not necessarily.
Yeah, and we all need boundaries. And like I was giving as an example earlier, when it comes to the construction side, the boundaries are there to protect us. And that is a perspective that we really have to grasp. If we don't understand that boundaries are there to protect us, what's going to happen is we're not going to have the right boundaries in place, because we will not know what we need to be protected from, and we won't understand the value of being protected.
And it doesn't mean that the people that you're putting these boundaries up for are dangerous. Sometimes we think, oh, if I have boundaries, it's because this person's toxic, it's because this person has been harmful towards me. But I actually think boundaries are one of the ways to express love to people.
Yes, I agree.
And some of the things you should do with the people that you love the most. Because if you want to be able to preserve the relationship, you want the relationship to be sustainable, you want the relationship to have understanding. And people can't read your mind, right? People don't know everything that you want. People don't They don't know everything that will bother you. So boundaries allows for them to understand you in a way that you may have not communicated in other ways. Yeah,
I agree. And before we continue, because there's so much we can say about why it's important to have boundaries, one thing I want to emphasize is the fact that when you have boundaries, it actually reflects self-value.
Yes.
Right? A lot of times, and people miss that. Yeah. They don't realize that when you put a set of boundaries in place within the context of a relationship, it shows off that you value yourself. It shows
a sense of identity as well, because you're familiar with who you are.
Exactly. And you can only truly have the right set of boundaries in place if you know yourself and if you know your value.
So do you think that people who struggle with identity struggle with boundaries?
Absolutely.
Why do you think they struggle?
Because I think first of all, and I think we're going to get into that soon, but there is a side of people pleasing that people who don't put boundaries in place usually have, right?
Or their relationships never get deep enough and never expand out wide enough to even get to the place of boundaries yet, because there's so much insecurity. Yeah. And maybe you don't feel validated enough to have good relationships or to have strong friendships or connections. Mm-hmm. So you don't even set up boundaries because you're expecting for the relationship to not last.
It's true. And that's one of those things that I think, again, we don't really think about and we don't actually understand to its fullness. But that's why we're doing this podcast. Yeah. So you guys understand why it's important to have boundaries and the value in having those set in place.
If there's one thing we want you guys to take from the podcast today, is that boundaries are an expression of love. Yes. Not an expression of pushing people away, not a way to lock yourself off. Because I think one of the misconceptions with boundaries is that, oh, I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm traumatized, so I'm not trusting people anymore. So I'm not letting people in anymore. Yes. I'm guarding myself from hurt. But guarding yourself from hurt is a traumatic response, not a boundary. A boundary is something that you do in a healthy state of mind. Something you do when you've really thought through what it is you deserve, and you really thought through what it is you expect. Mm-hmm. Not something that you put in place because, ouch, somebody hurt me, somebody really violated me, so now I'm gonna put these really thick steel walls up and not let people in and call it a boundary. Because I think that's one of the things that people mix up a lot, is using their trauma and their triggers and calling it a boundary. But really what it is that you've built up walls around your heart and you're just really unapproachable now. And then I think that's one of the reasons why people don't have boundaries, because they think it makes them unapproachable. But I actually think boundaries make you more approachable, because I personally like to be in a relationship where I can know what it is you expect and don't expect from me.
It's a lot easier, and you don't have to play the guessing game. Exactly. You don't have to seem more prophetic than you actually are. The person just tells you, hey, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I accept, this is what I don't accept. Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, when it comes down to why we even have boundaries and how it connects to or correlates with having low self-esteem, you realize as well that there is boundaries are put in place when something is worth protecting.
So how about we give an example of what a boundary is?
So, for example, actually, a big boundary,
A healthy boundary.
a boundary for us, actually, early on in our marriage. In our relationship when we first started dating, if we ever hung out for example, in a house, we couldn't just be us two. That's the first
we couldn't
thing.
be locked away in a space either.
So we had to have other people in the house.
Yeah.
And another thing was, if we wanted to even get like more specific, if we were in a room, the door was always open.
Yeah.
Every single time. And that was a boundary that we had set in place, not so much individually, but as a couple, because we did not want to fall into something that would not honor God.
Yeah, we didn't want to fall into sexual sin.
Yeah.
And we also let other people know what our boundaries were so that we had that level of accountability. A boundary could also look like, I don't like when, maybe you're a person that doesn't like physical touch too much. Setting physical boundaries for how much someone can touch you can also look like, I don't like when someone calls me after.
All right. Sorry, guys. We had a bit of a weird technical issue with my computer.
It literally just shut off.
It just shut off. I don't know what happened. It didn't show us any warnings or anything.
No.
It was charging and it just shut off. So, we're talking about boundaries.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the conversation and why it's important to have boundaries. So, I think where we left off was why we need them. But I want us to jump into the struggle with boundaries. Why do you think it's so hard for people to put boundaries in place? And actually, let me just leave it at that. Why do you think it's so hard for people to put boundaries in place? Like, what's the struggle?
Well, for number one, I don't think people see their value.
I agree.
I don't think people see the value in protecting themselves and guarding themselves. I think people think so low about what they deserve that they don't set any expectation for how people should treat them. And a lot of times when you've been treated badly for so long, or when you've opened yourself up to pretty much anything, like you kind of go wherever the wind blows, it's hard to even know where to start when it comes to boundaries because you've never done it before. You've let people walk all over you. You've never learned to say no. You've never learned to set those limitations for what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. So when the time comes to actually answer that question, it feels overwhelming because you don't see the value in why you need that. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that was a great answer. I think one of the main reasons as well, and this is a reason I think you might have some comments on, but I think one of the reasons why a lot of us have a struggle with setting boundaries is because we don't actually want to set boundaries. We like what it feels like to do things that we know we shouldn't be doing. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's like a rebellion.
Exactly. Like, I think there are certain things that we know we should have boundaries for. You know what I'm saying? For example, the example we said earlier, in the previous video, we spoke about how we were first dating. One thing that we did to not fall into lust physically is to make sure that there was always somebody in the house with us, and to make sure that if we were in a room, we were both together with the door open. So I think a lot of people, the reason why they don't want to set those boundaries in place is because they unconsciously, and some of us consciously as well, we want to fall into...
You want to cross those lines.
Yeah, we want to cross those lines. We want to fall. And we need to get to a point. The only way to be honest with yourself and have real boundaries is you have to just be transparent and say, this is wrong. Even though I want to do them, I'm still going to value myself and set those boundaries in place.
I think another thing too is we're afraid. We're afraid that people are not going to love us the same way, that people are not going to honor our boundaries. People are going to think our boundaries are too extreme. If we fall into the peer pressure, we fall into what people have to say to us. Like, oh, wow, that's a really extreme boundary. You're a person with a lot of boundaries. That I think there's like a negative connotation surrounding boundaries and what it actually means. And we're not taught that as kids. We're taught to obey and to always do what we're told, right? So I think even as adults, we obey and always do what we're told, and we never really think about, well, what do we actually want?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody, this is a strong statement, but I believe anyone who struggles with people pleasing is going to struggle with having boundaries.
Yeah, because all you're thinking about is what other people desire. You're not thinking about what you actually desire.
Exactly.
You may not even know what you desire anymore because you've gotten so used to falling into doing what everybody else wants you to do.
Exactly. And the thing is, the reality of that is that if you people please, there's definitely a part of you that really doesn't understand your own self-worth.
Yeah, there's a rejection there.
Exactly.
There's something you're looking to obtain from other people. There's a love, there's some kind of emotional attachment that hasn't been fulfilled that you're looking for, and boundaries sometimes feel like you're not going to get that anymore. But anyone that truly values you, anyone that really loves you, anyone who's for you and actually wants to see you progress in life is going to want to know what your boundaries are and is going to do everything that they can to sustain them.
Yeah, because anybody that crosses those boundaries clearly does not value who you are as a person. Right? And we have to be able to point or kind of make that connection of they're not respecting my boundaries means they don't value me.
You know what, Sam? I think another reason why people don't have boundaries is because they don't have any vision for their life.
That too.
So when you don't have a plan and you don't have a goal to where you're going towards, you don't know what limitations to put in place to protect that place.
Yes.
Like if I'm trying, for example, if I'm trying to release a book, like we just released our book, make sure you get it, Love and Discernment, right? If I'm in a place when I'm writing my book and I'm trying to, you know, be disciplined. So my boundaries are, okay, I can't hang out with people at this specific time. Yeah. I don't let people over at this time. I don't take calls. I don't go on social media. Because I have that goal, it's easy for me to set boundaries because I want to attain that goal. Yes. My vision for my life is that I want to be an author, for example, right? But when you don't have a vision for what you want to be, you don't have a vision for what you want to do, then it's hard to set those barriers that protect the goal that you're working towards.
Yeah, because it's a lot harder. And if you're a person who makes budgets on the regular, everybody knows that it's a lot harder to make a budget when there's no actual goal in mind.
Exactly.
Right? If you just have money sitting there and you have no vision for where your money is going, it's going to be quite challenging for you to make a budget because you'll be thinking, okay, well, what am I saving for? Where is my money going towards? And why is it going towards that? But if you have a vision in mind, what you do is you have a budget in place which acts as a boundary.
Yeah, like if you're saying towards a car, it's easier to not go out to eat. It's easier to not spend money on that dress or whatever it is you want to buy because you have a goal at hand. But when you're just saving money to save money, you're not going to do it because it feels like a burden at that point.
And you won't have any boundaries. Yeah. That's a given. And that's why a lot of young people just crash when it comes financially.
There has to be a why.
Yeah.
Yeah. There has to be a why. There has to be a motivation. If you're a person that lacks motivation, lacks vision, lacks determination, you'll find that you don't have a lot of boundaries in your life because you don't really have a why. It's like, what am I doing this for? What am I protecting? Do I see myself worth protecting? Do I see my goals worth protecting? Do I have goals that are there to be protected?
Yeah, that's good. Man.
So what do you think the consequences of broken boundaries can be?
That's
or no boundaries could be?
I think what it can do is, if I go back to the example of money, because I think that example makes things a lot more contextual for people, because we all know, let me put it this way, some of us don't understand the value of boundaries being broken, but majority of us understand the value of money being wasted.
Yes.
Right? So I'm going to use money as an example because, again, this is something that I think everybody can relate and understand in a very simple form. So when you don't have a budget in place and your money just goes anywhere, the consequence of that is eventually you're going to run out of money and it's going to hurt you, right? So when it comes down to boundaries, the reason why you put them in place is almost like
expending boundaries.
Exactly. Like you get hurt by the fact that you are allowing people to cross something that could potentially hurt you.
Yeah.
So for example, like I gave the example of the construction site. If you go past the boundaries and there's a giant pit behind the boundaries or the boundary, once you pass it and you fall, you get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? So the boundaries in place for you to not get hurt. And when we put boundaries in place, what happens is if we don't if we're not firm with those boundaries and people cross them, we eventually get hurt. And the consequence of not having boundaries in place is that people hurt us from all over the place because there's no boundary in place.
Now we're wounded. Now we're constantly wounded.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then if you go back to the money example, now you're not working towards your goals. You're not saving. You're not buying the things that you need. You're not attaining any type of wealth.
Yes.
You're not attaining any type of legacy because you've exceeded your spending boundaries.
Yeah.
Or you didn't have any spending boundaries in the first place.
And it's sad, but it's a lot of people's reality. I've come to realize that a lot of people just don't have boundaries in place, and it's really unfortunate. And that's why I believe, as we often say, this book helps you because it gives you guidance as to how to create those boundaries, because there's a chapter on boundaries. And it really guides you and navigates through, okay, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, this is what you should watch out for, if somebody is crossing your boundaries, as that itself is also a red flag.
Yeah, I think another consequence to not having boundaries is going in and out of relationships.
Yes.
Because people who are really like a value and people who are going to actually help you progress and push you forward in life are going to be people of strict boundaries.
Yes.
So if people who have strict boundaries find that you don't have boundaries, then you'll find that they start to kind of like distance themselves from you because you're constantly breaking their boundaries, and they don't know how to do relationship with you.
Yeah.
So you'll find that the people that are coming in your life may not be the best people, may not be the strongest set of people that you need, because you're kind of attaching yourself to people that are like you, who are kind of like going with the wind and living however they want to live.
Yeah. And that's not something you want to do. That's going to destroy you altogether. Okay. So in the comment section, do you guys have any questions as we continue? As you guys know, we try our best to make this a conversation. I know we get carried away sometimes by talking, but we want to make sure that you guys are involved, you guys are included. So if you have any questions
or comments,
please let us know in the comments section. Okay. Let's talk about the 4 layers of boundaries very quickly.
Yes. So here's the thing about boundaries. Naturally, when you hear the word boundaries, when you think about that word, you think about it in the context of physical boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, this person is not able to physically touch me. We think about like sexual boundaries. We think about just anything that has to do with our bodies or like harmful, like no one's allowed to beat you up or harm you in any type of way. But one of the things that I've learned along the way, especially in coaching people and working with people who've gone through trauma, is that's only one layer to boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries surround not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, and mental boundaries. Yeah. You need boundaries for your emotions, what you let in, what you don't let in, what you allow, what you don't allow. You need boundaries for your spiritual life. What you allow in, what you don't allow in, what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, what you consume, what you don't consume. And you need boundaries for your mind. What am I mentally able to handle? What is my mental capacity? Yeah. If you only have boundaries in one area and you only write boundaries in your life for one area, you'll find that people are violating the other areas and you can't quite figure out why you're unhappy in your relationships.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because you're only thinking about, well, why do I feel violated in this relationship? The person's not physically harming me, but maybe they're mentally harming you. Maybe they're emotionally harming you. Maybe they're spiritually harming you. So it's really important to, like, when you're writing out your boundaries, I think it's important to write it down so you can go back to it. You can have it as a kind of like a reminder in times when you're not being, diligent to your boundaries. But I think it's important to go through each 4 categories. Like, what in every relationship in my life, what are my spiritual boundaries? What are my emotional boundaries? Yeah. Do I feel mentally secure? Do I feel physically secure? Why is it that I'm feeling violated in the relationship? Because maybe it's not physical, but it's one of the other areas.
Yeah. And you have to know yourself in order to get to that point.
Yeah, you have to be self-aware for sure.
If you don't know yourself, you're not going to know what to set boundaries for.
Yeah.
So when people cross your boundaries, some people may even be confused by you getting mad or like popping off, and you're like, oh, but you know that? But the person's like, no, you never told me.
I didn't know you had that. Exactly. And sometimes it's because you've never thought about those other areas before. Yeah. Or you can be in a season that's more challenging. Yes. So maybe you're in a season that's more mentally challenging. So you have to kind of up your boundaries in a mental capacity. Maybe you're in a season that's more physically challenging. Yeah. So sometimes you can feel like, why do I feel like my boundaries are being crossed so much now more than before? But sometimes it's a representation of the season that you're in. So you have to be reevaluating your boundaries in every season and seeing if the old boundaries still work in the new season.
That's so good, because the thing is, the boundaries, if we look again at the construction site example, the boundaries are going to change dependent on the different stages of the construction project. That's right good. So at the initial stage, the boundaries may be around the foundation, while when you get closer to the end, for example, if you're building a house, the boundary may be in front of the front door, because if you go past that boundary, I don't know, the frame of the door might fall on you or something, So based on the stages that you're at, you have to set different kinds of boundaries.
And that's really good. So it depends on what you're building in that season. Exactly. Maybe some seasons you're more tired than other seasons. Yes. Maybe, for example, we're about to have a baby, right? There's going to be a different level of boundaries that we're going to have to set amongst each other, amongst other people. For example, for us to even spend time, it's going to be harder because now we have 3 kids instead of 2. So we can't live by the same boundaries that we had when we had 2 kids because there's been a new component to the project that's been added.
Exactly.
That's really good. I like that analogy.
And where a lot of people mess up is where they try to set boundaries for the new season that only worked in the previous season.
Yes.
I remember a very wise man told me, and I feel like I shared that last video.
Especially if maybe you're healed in one season and not healed in another season.
And he shared with me the analogy of how, and this is a time where I had a hard time creating boundaries and just transitioning in life altogether. And what he said to me was very powerful. He gave me the story of somebody who had a Honda Civic, who was very comfortable driving a Honda Civic, and then eventually got a promotion at work, which enabled them to get a Mercedes-Benz. And what he was sharing with me is when you transition from having a Honda Civic to a Mercedes-Benz, you cannot operate the car the same way. Yeah. So maybe before when you were driving your Civic, you could just like put your hand down and like pull something that would initiate the parking brakes. But with this Mercedes-Benz, maybe you just have to say it because the system is too advanced.
Even the gas that you're going to use in your car, the kind of mechanic that you're going to go to.
Exactly. And it's more expensive too.
Yeah.
So the reality, exactly. The reality is you want to be careful that you don't try to operate your old Honda Civic in this new Mercedes-Benz.
That's good.
If God promoted you somewhere, then that means that there has to be a new set of boundaries that you put in place so that you don't kill yourself.
Yeah, and someone said, I never write it out. That's helpful so that I don't compromise upon meeting someone. This is really good. Like, why writing it out helps too, because when you're in a season where you feel violated, where you feel hurt, there's something now for you to go back to look at and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because sometimes you feel hurt by something, but you don't necessarily know why you feel hurt by it. Until you go back to your notes, you're like, oh, wait, this person violated ABC. That's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Yeah. Also, when you go into new relationships, it also sets kind of like a mapping for how you want to do the relationship. Yeah. Because sometimes we think we want to wait until we're in a relationship to figure out the boundaries. But I think that you have to figure them out before and during and after relationships have ended.
Definitely.
It's a lot.
If you wait by the time you get into a relationship, it's going to be a lot to juggle. Like, okay, what do I like? What do I not like in the midst of the relationship?
Yes.
It's just more. It's better to figure it out before then.
And the person has already treated you a specific way. So now they have to adjust the new way to treat you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is not considerate of the other person.
Which I feel like transitions well to our next topic, which is relational boundaries. So my boundaries with you cannot be my boundaries with my friends, cannot be my boundaries with my family, cannot be my boundaries with my coworkers. Yeah. Your boundaries have to change and have to evolve depending on the relationship that you're in.
That's right. You can't keep the same boundaries for every single relationship. It just doesn't work that way. And
different stages of the relationship as well.
Because sometimes there are expectations that come with the setting of boundaries. Right? Yeah. So there's an expectation to, for example, say good morning to my wife when I'm in the stage of dating. Now, in the same way, in the stage of marriage, this could potentially not be an expectation. Yeah. So you have to be able to, just like with the boundaries, you have to be able to tell yourself, okay, this is the stage I'm at. This is what I'm going to put in place. This is the stage I'm at. This is what I'm going to put in place, and so forth. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in trouble for sure. Okay, as we're going, I know there are a few questions, so I want to make sure
we actually just answered the one that was there.
Okay, cool.
But I think maybe there was another. Oh, and there's another one. What are some of the advice you can give if your boundaries offend someone, like a close friend, someone you see day to day?
Well, you have to. I like that, and I think, again, somebody who struggles with people pleasing is going to have a hard time with that reality.
Yeah, and I think you have to have a conversation with a friend and explain to them why your boundaries are there in the first place. Let them know that this is one of the ways that you are preserving the relationship and not one of the ways you're trying to like destroy the relationship.
Exactly. And like I was saying at the beginning, you have to see boundaries as something that protects you. Yeah. Once you explain that to somebody, if they're still trying to cross those boundaries, it means that they're not trying to make you feel safe and protected. Yeah. And that should be very concerning for you if you're in a relationship. It's a big red flag.
Yeah. I would challenge them and I would ask them, why does this offend you? This is something that protects me. This is something that makes me feel safe. Is there a reason why this offends you? Because maybe they're just misunderstanding what your boundary is, or maybe there's a bit of trauma or a trigger somewhere there for them. So I would go deeper into a conversation and understand what exactly about the boundary is offending them. Are they offended by the boundary, or are they maybe offended by the way you presented the boundary? Are they offended because maybe you expected them to follow the boundary but never told them when it was?
Mm-hmm.
There could be more surrounding that offense.
Yeah, and I really believe that a lot of us just don't want to set boundaries in place because boundaries are not fun for a lot of people.
No,
You know?
it's uncomfortable.
Very much.
It's really uncomfortable to sit down and be like, hey, I'm not okay with you saying ABC to me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with you doing ABC. Especially if the person's been doing it for a long time in the
Yes.
relationship, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it could be.
It can change the whole dynamic of the relationship. But like I said, you have to deal with the struggle to people please when you're in a relationship or just in life in general, because when you struggle with people pleasing, it will affect your boundaries. It will affect you even putting boundaries in place,
Yeah.
because you're going to be thinking about the other person more than thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a very big problem.
Someone said that it means that you really have to understand where you are in every season. Intentional living is key.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good for you to talk about intentional living and like how do you stay present in life to know what you need in each season.
Yeah, definitely. And
because you're pretty good at being like self-aware and knowing where you're at in each season.
Thank you. You know, I beat myself up in that area, but thank you very much.
Really?
Yeah, I do, honestly, to be self-aware. I wish I was more self-aware.
But you're pretty in tune with like what you're feeling in every moment, and like you're pretty sensitive to
But I wish I was more.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
You
There's
could-
always
okay.
there's a room for improvement. But yeah, when it comes to being intentional, I think one of the things we don't want to miss, specifically in the area of like boundaries and so forth, you have to be careful that you don't confuse. Let me put it this way: you don't confuse being intentional with. I'm trying to put this the right way. Just sort of
being obsessive.
Yes, and also okay. Let me put it this way: you wanna be careful that you don't confuse being intentional and being very skeptical. Okay. Because
Interesting.
sometimes what happens is that because of our struggle of being skeptical, we put certain boundaries in place, and we're very intentional about putting these boundaries in place. But the intention behind it is skepticism, right? So being intentional is much more than your behavior; it's your motive. Why are you putting these boundaries in place? And oftentimes we don't think about these things in terms of like, okay, what is the reason why I'm putting this in place? And it may not even be to protect yourself. For example, if somebody wants to play, I know I know you did, for example, they want to play hard to get, you know?
Oh,
If you
whatever.
put, as a woman or as a man, if you play hard to get, if the motive is just, I want to feel valued and be hard to get, and that's why you're putting these boundaries in place, yes, you may be intentional to do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're putting these boundaries in place for the right reason.
Yes.
So when it comes to being intentional, it's very important for us to have accountability, and people who are willing to challenge us in that way, you know. And that's why, again, I have to recommend that book. Grab it in the description. You have to read and learn about yourself. And we are live.
For the third time.
This is our third time going live.
Our laptop charger just stopped working.
I don't know what's going on with this
Yeah,
charger.
it's weird.
So,
We're gonna wrap up.
Yeah, we're just gonna wrap this up. You know, for some reason, guys, there's a lot of technical difficulties tonight, and it just happens in the world of live streaming. So I'm doing my best not to let it get to me. But yes, so the title of this podcast is The Art of Saying No, right? I mean, sorry, the title of this episode is The Art of Saying No. So when we talk about the art of saying no, the reason why I like how we're saying it's an art is because when it comes to art, ideally, art is something that doesn't just happen. There is a level of skill level to produce a very high level of art. So when it comes down to the art of saying no, what we must understand is that when it comes to setting up boundaries, it's not easy from the beginning.
No.
It's something that actually has to be practiced over and over and over again until you get to a point where you don't have to think twice about setting up boundaries because you know for yourself, hey, I value myself, so I'm going to set up boundaries. So it's important for us to practice setting up boundaries and not just see it as just this thing that magically happens, you know?
Let's be intentional about
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that we have to know why our no's are no's and why our yeses are yeses.
Yeah.
And something that I teach my clients is to have a priority list. So the things that you always say yes to, the things that you always say, the things you always think about, and the things that are absolute no's for you.
Yeah.
If you have those written down, into 3 categories, then when those questions come up, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you be a part of this? Can you come out to this? If it doesn't fit into that category of priorities, then you just don't do it.
Yeah. And that's hard for a lot of people because even this is something we speak about all the time. A lot of us have a hard time with the concept of critical conversations, having the confronting people, like all of these little things. So boundaries fall under that same category of things that majority of us are not naturally good at doing and putting in place. But just like everything else, like I was saying, with critical conversations, with confrontation, these are things that in life, if you want to step into adulthood, if you want to have real relationships, you're going to have to do the work. And you're going to have to, just like we said earlier, be intentional to practice that art.
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a plan in place.
Yeah.
Not, you can't expect to naturally do it. It has to be something that you actually plan out, you actually think through, so that when the time comes and when the question comes and you feel like your back is against the wall, you've already recited what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and why you're going to say it. I think that's really key.
Cool. What would you say was your like the major highlight when it comes to boundaries? In terms of like the key point.
That boundaries are an extension of love.
That's good.
Because it's so easy to think that you're not loving people well, that you're being hardcore, that you're being harsh, that you're being extreme.
Yeah.
But really, the more you love someone, the more you care about someone, the more you'll want to honor their boundaries and the more you'll want them to honor yours.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that I would drive home more than anything else, because it's not you pushing people away. It's actually drawing people in closer to you, because the more people honor your boundaries, the more you want to be around them.
Yeah,
the more you value them.
Yeah, and I personally would feel very valued in somebody honoring my boundaries.
Yeah. You feel cared about.
Exactly. You feel like you're being, again, protected. And I think my biggest takeaway would be the association of boundaries to protection.
Yeah.
Like how it's important for us to view boundaries and perceive boundaries as something that protects us.
Yeah.
And that's not there to remove our freedom. The concept of freedom is one of those things that I believe a lot of people have a hard time with. And I remember when I was thinking about boundaries and being free and so forth, and I was thinking about in the Bible when it speaks about being slaves of the gospel, how a lot of people who struggle with freedom and who struggle even with past trauma of previous generations, we have a hard time with the concept of what freedom even looks like.
What does it mean?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think for some people, especially if you're of a race that has gone through slavery in the past and so forth, and you may even have still a level of resentment when it comes to that, it's going to be hard for you to fully define what freedom is, even as far as putting boundaries in place and seeing boundaries as a way for you to be free.
Yes. And not a way for you to be like confounded into a specific space.
Yeah.
And I think another takeaway I would say is the different layers of boundaries are really important.
Yeah.
Knowing that boundaries are more than one area, more than one specific need, but they're catering to all the different needs that you'd have, and they're catering to all different areas and relationships and dynamics in your life. So it's really complex. It's not an easy thing. It's not something you gain overnight. It's something you have to be really alert to and really on top of all the time.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that does conclude our podcast. You know what? Let's take 5 minutes to take some questions.
Yeah, what are some of the more questions that you guys have?
So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comment section and we will take a few minutes to answer those questions.
And what we'll do, because we know a lot of the videos got shot, 2 of the videos got cut, is we'll put it all into one video, and then we're going to ask you guys to partner with us once we've done that, once we posted that one video, to share it and let people know so they can see the fullness of today's live.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, let us know in the comment section, and if you do not, we will go and spend the rest of our evening together.
Yes. So for you, do you find it hard to set boundaries in your own life?
Yes. I would
Why?
say so. I think it's because um, there is a part of me, and this is me being completely transparent. There's a part of me that is not self-aware of my limits, right?
Mm,
And I believe when you're not self-aware of how much you can actually do, it can be very difficult to set boundaries in your life because you don't know the limit of when you should set that boundary.
yeah.
You know, so that's not something I
You think you
struggle
can do
with.
more than you can.
Exactly. I don't struggle with this so much now, but before, one of my biggest struggles was saying no to people. I had a really hard time saying no to people. If somebody asked me to do something, I just felt compelled to say yes. You know,
Mm,
and the thing is, when it comes to that, is you realize that you don't actually have boundaries in place.
mhm.
Like, what do you say no to? If somebody says, "Hey, can you do a video for tomorrow?" and you know the rest of your evening is already booked, if you say yes to that, it just tells you that okay, you have clearly a hard time putting boundaries in place. So I can say for me, even now, I'm still in a journey of learning how to make sure my boundaries are respected. And I'm not saying like in our relationship, I feel like we're pretty good at that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit easier for me personally when you're married. When you're not married, it's kind of just figuring out. When you're married, it's like, okay, well, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. But yeah, like that journey of putting boundaries in place is still there for me. But I can say one of the reasons why, in the past at least, to an extent, I struggle with putting boundaries in place was the concept of not knowing when to say no and even desiring to please other people through my yes.
That's good. I think I've struggled with the same thing, not knowing my limits, thinking I can do more than I can. But that whole concept of biting off more than you can chew, and then you realize I totally shouldn't have said yes to
Yeah.
this, and you feel kind of stuck.
Yeah, you feel very
And
stuck.
sometimes too, just you feel bad because people really need the help. You know that they need the help, but you know that they
Mhm.
won't be able to accomplish it without the help.
Yes.
So you kind of give into guilt, and you don't have that self discipline and that ability to say sorry, but I can't.
Mhm.
So, a question that we have here is what is one boundary that you set that ended up helping your relationship with God? I think one thing I could say in our marriage that we both set is prayer.
Mhm.
We see a big difference in each other if prayer is not prioritized.
Yeah.
So we give each other the space to have personal prayer and hold each other accountable to personal devotion and personal prayer, or else we don't love each other well. And I think putting that boundary in place of like, we don't just want that time of prayer together, but we need that personal one on one prayer has
Yeah.
made us grow deeper in God.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you've done that
Absolutely. That brought us closer to God.
Has about you closer to
Oh,
God?
me
Yeah.
personally closer to God. I would say, wow, that's good. I would say boundary with my time.
Mm,
And it kind of ties into what you're saying about prayer. Like when you have boundaries with your time, that way you're able to devote that time just for God.
yeah.
I don't believe, let me put it this way actually. There is no way you can have a successful devotional life without putting boundaries in place.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Because when you want to have a lifestyle of devotion to God, you have to make sure that you have that time with Him. You have to make sure, if you're married, you have to tell your spouse and communicate to your spouse, hey, I know, we're one, we're joined together. I still need my own time of devotion to myself because
Yeah.
I'm carrying my own cross. And realistically, which we spoke about today, when we get to heaven, we're not gonna have a ring on each other.
Yeah, we talked about that
We're not
today.
married in heaven, so
Oh.
I have to figure. A lot of people where they go wrong is they put all this focus on relational devotion without realizing that when you get to heaven, God's gonna look at you like, yeah, but where was our devotion, right? So I think it's important to put a boundary in place with your time because when you tell your spouse or when you tell your partner, whatever it may be, hey, I have this time to myself for God, then at that point it helps you to grow in your relationship with God. When you don't have that, your devotional life is going to be all over the place. You may even still pray with your spouse, but you won't have that one-on-one relationship with God, which every believer should have, married or not.
Yeah. Another question is, what are some of the ways you applied the saying no boundary? Um, Honestly, I think that what I was speaking about earlier with the list, knowing what my priorities are, knowing who my priorities are. So I'm going to say yes a lot more to my spouse than I may say it to my friend, for example. So if I categorize the question, if I categorize the task or whatever has been like brought before me, that going through that list and asking myself, is this a priority? Is this something I need to do? Is this something that really is part of my purpose and my like what God's calling me to do in that season? Taking the time to ask myself that question,
Yeah.
I find has allowed me to stick to my yeses and nos, and because boundaries are also about what you say yes to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have a fear of success, a fear of failure, so we say no to things that we should be saying yes to.
Yeah, sure.
That's something that we don't really think about with boundaries as well. But I think if you know where people stand in your life, then it's easier to say no.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's crucial, honestly.
Yeah. Another question is, how do you know if your boundaries are realistic and not coming from a place of hurt?
So that to me it ties into what we're saying in the other part of the video when it comes down to knowing yourself and knowing whether or not you're saying these things out of skepticism or if they're actual real. Now, here's the thing that a lot of people don't want to admit. Many of us don't actually know ourselves very well.
Yeah.
And that is where accountability comes in place.
Yeah.
External accountability.
People who are trusted.
People that you can trust, people that know you well, people who have done life with you for a certain amount of time, people that have examined you, people who know what your favorite color is, what the things you like to do, people who actually know your heart
and know your capacity.
Exactly. Don't know the photo. They may not be familiar with the Photoshop version of you, but they know the real you, right? The day-to-day type of person. So those people, when you don't know yourself very well, those people come in very handy because they can point out certain things in you that you may not see in yourself.
Yeah.
They may tell you, hey, just so you know, like you've been looking very stressed lately. I think taking on that project may be a little bit too much, right? And having those people, you don't need many of them, even having 2 or 3 people. Worst comes to worst, even one person, which is great when you're married. Having somebody that can tell you that is going to help you in a major way.
Yeah.
To know whether or not you are being extreme with your boundaries, whether or not you're actually placing realistic boundaries, or whether or not you shouldn't even have that boundary because it doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of humility to be able to admit that, maybe somebody knows you a little bit better than you know yourself for now.
Yes.
And being able to trust them and trust what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing is analyze what brought you to that boundary.
Yes.
So stop and think, did I have this boundary before I was hurt? Like, why? What do I feel? Do I feel triggered when this boundary is crossed? Like, does it trigger me to that place of hurt? And then that will let you know where it's coming from. Or is it just like, no, this is just something that I really enjoy or something that I really want? Or is it that, oh my God, every time I think about this happening to me, it makes me think of that bad situation that happened that time? Then you know where the root of it has come from.
Mm-hmm. That's very good.
Yeah,
I think that was it,
I
right?
think that's it for questions.
Okay, cool.
So, guys, please get the book, Love and Discernment.
Yes.
Get it, read it, invest in yourself. We invest in so many other things. It is not expensive. We purposely put it for $12.99 only, and it will be sent out this upcoming Friday. So get your pre-order tonight. When you leave this, when this podcast ends, go and grab a copy and get a copy for someone else. Share it in your story. Share it on your social media.
Yes.
Please tag us. We really and truly believe that this book is going to be a blessing and how people really establish healthy relationships in their life.
Yeah. And also make sure if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified every single time we go live. And who knows, guys, we might go live one of these days this week, as a pop-up live. Who knows? That's why you want to be subscribed and you want to be notified. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight, despite some of the technical hiccups. Some of you guys have followed us throughout the 3 videos. Thank you for hopping.
Loyal.
I appreciate that. So, guys, we love you. Remember, this upcoming Friday, our book is officially being released.
Yes.
So make sure you let the world know that this will change their lives.
All right, guys. We love you. We bless you. And we'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.